This podcast is not meant to be professional advice of any kind. It is meant to be informative and entertaining. If you make any changes to your life, see the appropriate professional before you do so. Hello and welcome to Super Age. My name is David Harry Stewart. I'm the founder of Ageist. At Super Age, we help you live better and become the best version of yourself. And who doesn't want a super age? A big thank you to the two sponsors of the show this week. First of all, we have Element, spelled L-M-N-T, my favorite electrolyte mix. That's what I put in my water at the gym. That's what I put in my water in the morning. Go to drinkelement.com/ageist and check out the special deals they have for the listeners of the Super Age podcast. Today's show is also brought to you by Viome. Their revolutionary mRNA technology has transformed my gut health. The listeners of this program will save $30 off the Viome Health Intelligence Test. By using the special link in the show notes below, use the code AGEIST at checkout. Welcome to episode 96 of the Super Age podcast. It is great to have you with us. This will be dropping on August the 10th, 2022. So I hope everybody is having a wonderful summer with their family, with their friends, enjoying the weather. It's lovely here in the mountains of Utah. And I received a very interesting email a couple days ago from some of the local authorities letting me know that there was a moose family in residence near where I live here and to leave them alone. Now, I've only seen a moose up close once, sort of by accident. I came out of my house one night to go for a walk, and there was a moose in the driveway. And the last thing on any sensible person's mind is to bother a creature of that scale. I mean, I don't know if you've ever, most people haven't really been up close to a moose, but they're just gigantic. They're about, I'm not exaggerating, they're like 10 feet tall. They look like dinosaurs with fur. And the moose just sort of glared at me, and I was like, whoa, going back in the house. So anyway, we have a moose family here doing moose things and, eating moose food and having moose dreams, I guess. I don't know. Whatever goes on in moose world. But outside of moose news, on Monday, on our Hot or Not show on Instagram, we had Asia Maybrock, who is just fantastic. I don't know how old Asia is. I'm gonna take a wild guess. I'm probably going to get it wrong. About 23. And she's brilliant. She was so much fun. I love having people on that show who can banter and are, I don't care what age they are if they got something fun to say. So it's really fun. Check it out. That'll be on Instagram on We Are Ageist. Today's show is brought to you by Viome, with some very unique mRNA technology to get your gut back on track. Now, I just want to say a huge thank you and a note of appreciation to Viome for how they helped me with my gut. What some of you may not know, which I don't often talk about, is that over the last 2 or 3 years, I was in the ER a couple of times with gut issues. My gut's been a real problem, and I haven't really been able to figure out what it is, nor have any of my doctors. So I've done the usual parasite bacteria testing, food allergies, food sensitivities, changing of diet, on and on. No results. And the reason was they weren't able to test for the things that Viome does. I took the Viome Health Intelligence Test, and it's a combination of a stool test and a blood sample. You send it in. I got mine back in about 2.5 weeks. And there's a series of recommendations: foods to eat, foods not to eat. And the foods not to eat on my end, anyway, there were about 10 of them, most of which had to do with causing my gut dysbiosis, which means like a dysregulation of the gut. Something's happening there that shouldn't be. And these were often caused by plant viruses. So for instance, with me, I have blueberry plant virus. So I have no problem with blueberries. Blueberries are great. What I have a problem with is the blueberry plant virus, which was helping this, to amplify this dysbiosis in my gut. So by stopping eating things like blueberries, green beans, tomatoes, and a couple other things, I was no longer feeding the plant virus that was in my gut. And I'm not exaggerating. In 3 days, my gut was 50% better. I don't know any other way to have tested this, to have discovered this. This is a test that I think it's just so important, and I ask all of my friends to do it. Gut health is so primary. Gut health equals brain health. Bad gut, you're going to have, cognitive issues later in life. So please check these guys out. It's a really good thing. And just for the listeners of this podcast, in the show notes below, there's a link for Viome. Use the code AGEIST and you'll save $30 off their health intelligence test. It's 2022. We don't have to guess anymore about our diets. As I often say on this show, we have a Google call-in number, which is 801-871-5291. And I'm going to repeat it, 801-871-5291. Any questions, any comments, you just want to give us a shout out, you just think we're awesome and you need to communicate that, give us a shout and we'll play it on the show. This week, we had a really interesting email come in, and this is from Shelley, and concerning David Hardy's show last week, David Hardy, the functional neurologist. Shelley says, I love this episode by Dr. David Hardy. I, too, work in neurology, and I'm all about things sensory and proprioceptive. I teach yoga for brain health, and I find post-concussion and cognitive declining people make huge gains by learning new postures, becoming more aware of their senses and their bodies. I am also a person who sustained a concussion, ironically, a ski crash concussion, and then subsequent ones due to poor proprioceptive skills. Now, however, I'm back to riding my road bike 100 kilometers. I've seen post-concussion clients transform and seniors even improve their balance and even become more sharp. The brain can relearn and improve. Thank you, Shelley, for that. I'm with you 100%, and I think David would also agree that movement in so many cases is the road to better cognitive health. So thanks for sending that in. This week on the show, I'm so pleased to bring everyone Anissa Buckley. And Anissa is one of my favorite people. She has quite a story. She's been quite an adventurer out there. She started companies, sold companies, climbed mountains, and then had some tragedy happen. And through that, she started a new company called Be Untethered. It's all about menopause and things like how to exercise, what to eat, and all the stuff that doctors don't tell people. Gentlemen out there, I know you're just about to tune out when I see the word menopause. Hey, hip up to this. This is half of the other half of the population of the planet. So we need to know about this. So we're going to bring Anissa on in just a few minutes after a quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is also brought to you by Element, the electrolyte mix that I've been using to stay hydrated and to keep my electrolytes in balance. I started placing Element electrolyte mix into my water after my workouts on the recommendation of a friend of mine who's a 50-time Ironman competitor. I told him that I was having a lot of trouble recovering from my workouts, and I thought it was my age. And it turned out it was my electrolytes. And once I started putting Element into my water, I noticed an incredible difference in my ability to recover from my workouts. It went from, truthfully, an hour or two to 10 minutes. Because the problem was my electrolytes were off. Now what I do is I put Element in my water when I get up first thing in the morning. I also have it in my water that I drink during the day. And then, of course, at the gym, I make sure that there's Element in my water. And, of course, in my beloved sauna, the same thing, Element in the water. So it turns out that some of that brain fog and just muscle ache and sluggishness that I was feeling was not age-related. It was actually electrolyte-related. We talk a lot about hydration on this podcast, but the electrolyte mix within that water is really critical. Right now, Element is offering listeners of this podcast a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packets free with any Element order. It's a great way to try out all 8 flavors and share Element with a salty friend. Get yours at drinkelement.com/ages. This deal is only available through this link. You must go to drinkelement.com/ageist. We'll be leaving that link in the show notes too. After you check it out, let me know what you think about it. Did it make the change for you that it did for me? Just a quick note on the sponsors for this program. We're, of course, very grateful for their support, which makes this podcast possible. But these are also products and brands that we support, that we personally use, and more than that, that have made an impact in our lives. We hope that you check them out and that you find the same positive impact that we have. Hey, Anissa, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to have you on the show today. You're such a hero. You're just like, I think the word for you is champion. I want to I want to send you like a t-shirt with the word like champion on the front.
I love that. That works for me. Thank you.
So you have, you're up to all kinds of interesting things today with your new company, but I want to let people know your background and how you got here. So tell us a little bit about, especially the food research and like where you came from.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started years ago. You know, I went to Cornell University undergrad. I'm starting really way back, but I'll move fast. So I actually went through their food science program, came out of that and actually spent some time also at their hotel school where they had honestly, one of the first spa and wellness courses ever. I'm joking sort of, but I mean, this was in the 80s. So I took a spa and wellness course there when the word wellness was not like massively overused like it is today. It's really my passion for food and for wellness started there. Fast forward many years, I worked for Procter and Gamble, which had a lot of food products at the time, like Jif peanut butter, Folgers coffee, several others, deep frying oil, a lot of things, Crisco, and then Bird's Eye Food as well, which of course vegetables, right? And several other companies in between, which included Reebok. So I was into the athletic side of things. And ultimately what I found was it really sort of ended with Bird's Eye, where I was working on a brand of frozen vegetables. And I had a CEO who did not think that health and wellness was going to be a long-term trend. And so he and I did not really see eye to eye. He thought it was a fad. And so I kind of saw the writing on the wall and thought, this is probably not a place for me in the longer term. And I had also, again, spent about 15 years by that point in Fortune 500 company roles in sales and marketing positions, both. And, realized that it just wasn't a great fit for me because I tend to think outside the box. So I'd sit in meetings and I'd have people look at me oddly, like, what are you thinking? Why are you thinking that? So I basically decided at that point to go out on a limb and I started doing some work with a local grocery retailer in upstate New York. And that really turned into a food database, which captured all of the nutrition fact panels for all the products in the grocery store and then scored them against FDA claims, things like good source of fiber, gluten-free, heart healthy. And
Whoa, stop.
yeah,
How many items was this?
all of the products in a grocery store. So there were at any given time, there's like 100,000 products in a grocery store.
You scored 100,000 products.
Oh, 200, 300. Yes. Because when you bring in private label for each individual grocery retailer, it adds up. So
how long did that take?
Well, I didn't do it hand by, like item by item. You set up algorithms. And so you create this algorithm for each claim. So heart healthy, there's actually 17 different algorithms for the term heart healthy, depending on where you're using it, in the meat category, in the meal category, in the canned good category. So, so I had a lot of help, obviously, with creating all the algorithms on the back end. And then it's as simple as, think about a nutrition fact panel, calories, total fat, saturated fat, all the different fields of data that you have. We put that all on a table and then we ran the algorithms against that to basically come up with these claims. And no one was really doing that in the grocery retail space at the time. So that was where I actually teamed up, sort of sought out this organization, the Joslin Center up in Boston. It's a Harvard affiliate, and I hired them to actually help us create that criteria, as I said. So things like, again, using the heart healthy claim in the right places. I knew I needed some credentials behind it, which I didn't really have at the time. So we put that relationship together. So it was the Joslin Center, it was myself, and then I actually was working with Vestcom, which was the largest shelf tag printer in the country. And so we partnered my database with their shelf tags, and voila, had the ability to put a claim on the shelf edge for grocery shoppers. So the outcome of that was really cool because we started working with all of the large grocery retailers like the Krogers and I don't know if you would know Ahold that has all the Stop and Shops and the Hannafords up and down the East Coast, the Food Lions, Safeway, et cetera. And we started putting these programs in place on the shelf edge. And that ultimately allowed me to go to the White House when President Obama was in place and meet with his personal chef who was working on the Let's Move program with Michelle. And what we were trying to do there was really look at different strategies for helping reach the entire US population to, again, guide them in making more healthful choices when they grocery shop. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into the food piece of things, if that makes sense.
Okay. So
it's a lot.
No, it's great. It's great because I know your new initiative is very food oriented. So I just want to let people know, like, what you're talking about. So then some things happened. You had this rocking career, and you sold a couple of those businesses, right?
I sold the database to Vestcom ultimately and went to work with them for 8 years and headed up health and wellness, working with all large retailers, drugstores, grocery stores, et cetera, putting those programs in place. And then what happened was my mom was diagnosed with dementia at age 78, which was pretty young. And so we had started to see the signs, and I knew that I was not going to have a lot of time left with my mom as I knew her. So I actually resigned after 8 years and started another company, which was called Real Life Food and Fitness, which was in Rochester, New York, near my parents. And it was a studio that had high intensity training, fresh meals, which were 500 calorie fresh meals that people pre-ordered, and then health coaching under one roof. And so I had that for a very short period of time because my mom, well, I can tell you the rest of the story, but basically, yeah, my life changed as I was in that business and changed fairly dramatically.
Tell me some of those. Let's hit some of those changes. What happened that year?
Yeah. So this was in 2014. We had opened the business at the end of 2013 and ultimately sold it in 2015. So it was a very quick flip of that business. And the reason for that was in 2014, my mom and my dad both passed away. I went through a divorce. I had been in a marriage for 12 years. And as I mentioned, moved down the path of selling this business. So I kind of had all of that happening at once, which people have tragedy all over the place. This wasn't it wasn't anything unusual. It just all happened at the same time. And that decision to exit the business to then obviously, my parents died and the divorce, left me in a situation I hadn't been in before, which was no longer a wife, no longer a daughter, which I'd been my whole life. And then, really no longer a business person. And that had been my identity for, at that point, like 25 to 30 years. So I really was floundering with who am I, which I think a lot of people go through in midlife. And so I really hit that pretty hard in 2014.
Yeah. The great untethering.
Yeah.
Which we get to something, which is another word. We're going to get to it in a moment.
We'll get
there. So then the athletic adventures.
Yeah. So I had always been athletic. I had always been, I would call it minorly athletic, right? So when you're doing startups, when you're working for Fortune 500, you just kind of try to get a workout in wherever you can. But I had become more passionate about it with this second business startup because we would have teams of obstacle course racers. And so, I got very into the Spartan obstacle course racing, the Tough Mudders, all of those types of challenges. And I knew what I was, I was sort of learning what I was capable of. I didn't know, I was learning at that point. And so as I was, kind of exiting all of these different identities in my life, I met an individual who had been a national champion in the UK for velodrome and had won a bunch of these sort of Tough Mudder events over there. And we just had a lot of common interests in terms of pushing boundaries and adventure. But I really didn't know what that meant quite at the time. So at that point in time, we had a discussion about Ironmanning and, some different endurance events. And I decided that was a new goal for me, was to kind of see how far.
How old were you when this went on?
I was 45 when that happened.
Okay.
So, I was interested in what I could do physically. And so we literally took off, and I at this point in my life, for the first time, I had no real obligations. I'd never ever lived like that. I'd always been very goal driven and very responsible. And so I sold everything I had. I sold the house I had in New York. I put everything in storage. I bought a bike. I hadn't really had a bike. I got serious about everything. And we ended up going overseas. We went to basically South Africa. We spent a lot of time in Africa in general, and Mexico and Nepal and a bunch of places, and just started undertaking events. So the first was training for Ironman, a full Ironman, which I had never done a triathlon. So try that one, right? It's like, why don't we just do a full Ironman without any experience? So that was a real learning, because there's a lot to learn, but not just the technicalities of the event and the transitioning from, a bike to a run or anything like that. It's really the training that comes down to it, and learning to push your body to those extremes. So being on a bike, for example, for 5 hours in 100-degree weather, what that feels like. Or summiting an extreme high altitude mountain that's 19,000 feet, what that does to you. So that was a lot of what we undertook. And at the same time, besides just undertaking the physical extremes, we were living in a minimalist situation, so that we didn't have a rental car, for example. So everywhere we went, we were either walking, we were riding bikes. So just the energy expenditure of constant movement in a day was really a wake up call for my body. And that very first year, I ended up now understanding what I had was something called Red S, which is it's an energy deficient system where you're just not able to take in enough calories. And so I ended up extremely low body fat for me. I mean, everybody's different, right? But I was probably in the 14-15% range for an older female. I also was extremely anemic and almost hospitalized for that, because I wasn't eating. I haven't eaten red meat for a number of years, but I wasn't getting enough, meat, iron in my food. So that was it. The first year was really, really eye opening on taking care of your body in extreme events like that. So starting point for change.
What did you learn going from this very structured, very supported environment? Like, where you work in a corporation, you have all these people around you, up and above, there's things are planned for you, to suddenly you're carrying all of your possessions in a backpack in Africa for a year. There's no support. What did you learn from that?
So it took a while, I should say. There were a number of lessons that came out of it. One was what you're capable of. And we block our minds many times. We have these barriers in our minds to help protect us, right? The brain is really designed to protect us. So we don't necessarily push beyond some of those more comfortable places. We may think we do. We may think, oh, I'm going to go do, 3 sets of 30 push-ups. And that may be, a real stressor and really hard. But is that really the best that you could do? So I learned to push beyond those pain points. And what that taught me was, once I did it once, it was so much easier the second time. It's like the Roger Bannister conversation, right? The first year Roger broke sub 4-minute mile. He was the first man to ever do it. And then the next year, 16 people did that. So that tells you a little bit about mindset. And that's an extreme goal, obviously. But, that was one. One of the other things I learned was really to use the environment around you as your school, right? As an environment for learning. So, previous to that, we're a little bit US centric in our thinking, right? We're like, the US is the greatest. It's the best place you could ever live. There's no place ever even close. And I'm not here to bash the US at all. I'm here to just say that there's some amazing countries and lifestyles out there. And if you open your eyes, you'll realize that maybe some of our choices here on the way that we live aren't necessarily helping us from a health perspective. So I know I may have mentioned this one to you once before when we've had a chat about being in the Himalayas, and just the people that you meet there and the shape that they are in. Now, they're not going to the gym and lifting weights every day. They're not running on treadmills, but their environment of having to go forage for wood to actually make a fire, because you can't actually cut down a tree in the Himalayas, right? You have to go find what's on the ground. So that may require walking long distances and carrying 100 pounds of wood on your back to your home. Not that I'm suggesting we undertake that, but it's a real learning to what that does to a body and the shape that some of these individuals are in and what they can do. So, that was another learning that I had from that environment, from living in that sort of minimalist lifestyle. And what that did for me coming back to the US was, I find it hard to sit all the time. We have a very, obviously sitting conducive culture here where, we work a lot. We are workaholics to some degree. And I think that's changing a little bit, but we still have that mentality. That's partially why we have so many problems with chronic conditions here in the US, so many more than other countries, because we think it's a luxury to get in our car and drive 1 mile to the grocery store. But unfortunately, it's also a hindrance to our overall longevity and health.
Yeah, that's right. I've been an oncologist once, and I remember seeing people like this, and what they call hills, we would call really large mountains, because to them a mountain is something like over 25,000 feet.
Right.
But a hill is like, oh, it's just 10,000 up, 10,000 down, and you do that. I was like 40 when I did that. I was pretty good shape, and it like wrecked me. And there were people carrying like 60, 80 pounds and like nothing. But And I noticed when I was once I was in Dea, which is a little town on an island on the Mediterranean called Majorca. And I remember going to the cemetery there. Just, I don't know, it was like pretty, and it was like lit at night. And I started looking at the age people died. And, they died very young, childhood stuff. But most people seemed to be like 90s over 100. Yeah. And you look at where they live on a cliff, and you got to go up and down the cliff. And if you want to fish, there's like this huge heavy wooden boat. You got to push that out. You got to row it. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah. They have very physical lives. And I think, you and I would both agree that, Dan Buettner, the work he's done on Blue Zones has highlighted a lot of that, right? It's not necessarily about, physical, extreme physical fitness. It's about movement, right? It's just about having more movement in your life. And that's a big takeaway for me is since I've been back, the multiple years I've been back, I try to get more walking in my day. It's such an elementary piece of what we just don't do here in the US. We don't. So,
I'm a huge fan of walking. It's just like it's a fundamental human movement that we
exactly. Do. And that's, we talk about back problems and just structure of your body. And there's so much to be said for just going for a walk to help with your core, right? Because you have to hold yourself upright, as simple as that sounds. And it's that movement of keeping your spine straight and moving forward that can help you if you've got significant back problems, as simple as that sounds. And we just don't do it because we don't have time, or we think we don't have time.
We think we don't have time.
We think we don't have time. I agree with you. It's a priority. You have to make. That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Stop it with the streaming TV binging. Think of how much extra time you'd have.
Exactly.
Just saying. So I want to sort of talk about the other piece that's starting to go on with you here, which is menopause. And how did that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So prior to all of this, I was not aware of anything called perimenopause, which now we're, I think, talking a little bit more about. It's the 5 to 7 years before menopause. And just to be clear, menopause is only a 12-month period in a woman's life where she stops having her cycle anymore. And everything after that's considered post-menopause. So there's these different stages of menopause. So when I was 45, clearly I was in perimenopause, which is really the most critical time for a woman because that's when a lot of things can happen to your hormones. Your estrogen levels can just start roller coastering, where your progesterone, which kind of balances or offsets estrogen, can stay flat. And you can imagine in a hormonal cycle, that can really cause havoc, right? That's where a lot of women come up with or start having hot flashes, night sweats, just headaches, mood swings, hair loss. I mean, I could go on. There's a list of 34 symptoms. But for me, interestingly, I didn't go through that at that time because, and this is part of our learning, because my body was being put through some pretty extreme things, which it was stressing my body, right? With these daily workouts that were anywhere from literally 6 hours to 10 hours. And that could be on a bike and then going and weightlifting and then swimming and then carrying groceries literally up a mile, up a hill. I mean, it was constant movement and my body just wasn't used to that. So I literally stopped having a cycle for like 3 years and never knew that it was because of my activity at the time. I thought it was, truly menopause. When I sort of got through that period of life with all the travel, I actually started having a cycle again. And that was where a lot of things changed in my body. And I started realizing body composition changes where I was losing muscle mass. I wasn't sleeping at all. I had major hair loss problems, mood swings. I couldn't make a decision to save my life, which was not me from the first, 50 years of living. So this was around my very late 40s, going into my 50s when all this was happening. And that's really what struck me was what just happened, what just changed in my life so dramatically that, I've literally gained like 10 percentage points in body fat. And I could go on down the laundry list, the sleeplessness and all that. But it really shook me that I went from being in this unbelievably amazing, great shape, which we can be in our late 40s, our 50s, our 60s. And you know that too, David. I was in unbelievable shape. I could have kept up with any 25-year-old across the board. I was biking with 30-year-old men when I was in my late 40s. And that was all due to the lifestyle that I was living at that time. So coming out of that, it was almost a double whammy because I stopped the amount of exercise. I couldn't keep up the time commitment to that, unfortunately. And that's really a lifestyle. It's a period in time. I may go back. I may do another Ironman in 2 years or something, but it's a period of time. You can't keep your body moving at that level, continuously. So, coming out of that basically was where, that happened. And then I was sitting a lot more because I was starting a company, doing work. And that double whammy really did change me. And again, put me really into true menopause, where I, after sort of about a year of having a cycle, it was like all of a sudden I didn't again. And then I found out I was really in true menopause. And so I really wanted to understand what could we do as women with our lifestyle, not necessarily about medications and, taking a whole lot of things, but more about how could we change our lifestyle to help us mitigate some of these impacts that we see. And so that's kind of where I am today, was sort of moving down that path of changing my lifestyle to address what we've found in research that can help us.
So you've told, for like a guy my age, I probably know more about this than the average guy. But you told me some things that were really remarkable to me that I had never heard before. Mm-hmm. And talk to me a little. So the first sort of like eye-opening thing you told me was about metabolizing carbohydrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, digging into research, what we now know, and this has been more recent, is in the past maybe 10 years that we've started talking about it. Doesn't mean it wasn't out there, but in the past, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, you can find research studies to tell us that when women hit menopause, they lose the ability to utilize carbs the same way. And the reason for that is that estrogen is a transport vehicle for moving the sugar that's in your bloodstream, which is caused by a carbohydrate, moving that sugar into your muscles and cells where it can be used efficiently. So we lose that ability to do that. And so what that means is we have to take a look at how many carbs we're consuming. And then there's a whole timing component to that as well, which we can talk about in a minute. But yeah, that's a very big one. The other one is protein. So of the three macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, protein, and fats, carbs need to be reduced. And then protein actually has to be managed differently, which is essentially to make sure you're getting enough, first of all. And that's really about 30% of calories for the average woman, but also that it's evenly dosed throughout your day so that you're not just having one big meal with a whole lot of protein, but you're making sure you've always got amino acids in your bloodstream for a number of reasons. So those are two biggies that were kind of wake-up calls to me.
Before we get to the timing on this, what's the mix that you're recommending as far as the macros?
Yeah. So the average woman today in America consumes about 48% of her diet from carbs, and we're recommending taking that to 40%. She consumes about 16% of her diet from protein, and we're taking that up to 30%. And then fats are the other 30%. So it's 40, 30, 30 for carbs being first. Yeah. And then go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, and then there is a timing component to that, which we can talk about.
As far as the composition of these things, the protein, I mean, they're not all proteins the same, not all carbohydrates the same, not all fats the same. Mm-hmm. So what are when you're talking about increasing protein, what are you advocating for people to eat?
I mean, that's hard to say because you know that people have their own personal principles or decisions. So, I mean, we have sample meal plans that contain both animal-based protein as well as plant-based protein. Mm-hmm. It really depends on the individual. It is harder to get that amount of protein and quality protein in when you don't have any animal product in your diet, but not to say it's impossible. It's just a different approach, you know?
I think, all of this around eating it, and I'm kind of agnostic. Veganism doesn't personally work for me. I'm not against anyone who does that. But I think what it does is all of this, when we're talking about macro mix or different, are you doing a Mediterranean diet, or you're doing, whatever kind you're doing, it brings a consciousness to what you're eating, mm-hmm. where it comes from and what's it going to do. And I think that's a key element. If mm-hmm. if you want to age better, that's one of the big ones.
It's huge. Right? It's huge. Yeah. And we overlook it. I mean, it's the CDC would tell you, this is kind of taking the other end of the spectrum, but if, chronic condition wise, lifestyle can control for about 80% of chronic conditions. And the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, says that. That's not just you and me making up statistics. That's a serious statement saying, hey, your lifestyle. And we know that. Right?
We have agency in our lives. We can control these things. It's not an act of God.
Right. No, but it's always amazing. It's fun to watch people when they do make that transformation. Yeah. And I don't know, David, if you've ever been through it, because you look like you're always 100% lean and totally on target. As a woman who's gone through a lot and traveled a lot and stuff, I've certainly gotten off my A game at certain points in time. And I don't usually fluctuate more than, 10 pounds, but those 10 pounds make a big difference. And it's the quality of what's going in my mouth. And I'll tell you, just for me, and again, I know from a number of women I've worked with, when you cut out, let's say, the lower quality forms of carbohydrates as a starting point, it's immediate. It's like the next day you feel better. Right. You almost feel like your skin looks better. Your energy's better. I mean, it doesn't take very long to start feeling better. So, and I do know you've had a piece of pizza here and there, so maybe you feel that too.
Once in a while, I'll do that, but
once every 6 years.
But I think that this is, I think this is a really important point here. That yes, there are long-term cumulative effects, both negative and positive, depending on what you put in your body. But there are also immediate, like 24-hour effects that if you make some changes will have a profound effect on the way you feel, on the way you sleep, on the way you think, all of that.
Yeah. I've already heard. I mean, we just started our 6-week program 2 weeks ago, and we're in our second week basically. And I have already had comments from people from shifting their diet. They're sleeping better and they're feeling better and their energy levels better and they're thinking more clearly. I mean, it's that blatant and that obvious, when you start making those changes. And that is why we did what we did, which was start a business to help women more easily make those changes.
So I have neglected the promotional aspect here. What?
I just
what
brought
is
you
the name
back.
of your
I didn't
company?
mean to. Let me tell you about my company.
Tell me, please. We're gonna get into timing and exercise and all that, but tell everybody what is the name of your company and what is the program that you're doing? Because I think everybody needs to know about this.
Yeah, thanks. The company name is Be Untethered. So it's Be-Untethered online. The program name is Transform 6, and that is 6 weeks to transform yourself. And it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle change. You need to commit to it. And we will talk quickly about exercise. I know we're going to run out of time, but the program provides you with an app, and that app allows you to put in your metrics, your height, weight, age, activity level, hormone status. And from that, we will give you back a macronutrient plan just for you, so that you'll know how many grams of protein, fats, carbs you need for breakfast, as an example. The piece we haven't talked about is timing. So there is a timing component, which is to front load your day with calories and carbohydrates. So by 4 in the afternoon, you should have consumed 70%. So this is all built into our back end algorithm that helps guide you in terms of when and what you should be eating. So we'll stop there for that piece of it, but there's a whole exercise component as well.
Yeah, I just want to reinforce this timing component. This is exactly. I had Dr. Mike Roizen on the podcast recently, and Mike's head of wellness at the Cleveland Clinic, very well-respected guy. And as he told me, a calorie in the morning is 0.9, a calorie at night is 1.3.
That's interesting. See, I didn't know that statistic, but ours is based on research with menopausal and postmenopausal women, not us, but we've taken others' research. But I mean, that's the finding is, and we know this intuitively, right? I mean, I hate to say this, it's not drastically different than intermittent fasting in a sense, but again, you need to shift your macros up, right? It's not just about timing, but if you stop eating between 6 or 7 at night until 6 or 7 the next day, you're going to feel better in the morning. You're going to be clear. You're going to wake up. You're going to want to get out of bed. You're not going to roll over and hit the snooze, right? You're going to have that energy for life that can, unfortunately can get hindered when you don't pay attention to how and what you're eating.
What I really like about Be Untethered is that you've put together in a way that I've never seen the 360 lifestyle components around how to, in menopause, live your best life. I'm just not, other people are talking about spraying things on their skin or just a whole other range of things. But this is fundamental and nobody's talking about this.
Right. I mean, we do have an exercise component and a supplement recommendation, and the supplements are real supplements. It's not just, sort of vaporware stuff. I mean, it's got science behind it to tell you, hey, if you've got this symptom, this is something that's been proven clinically to be effective. But it's a holistic program. And we even do get into mindfulness a little bit because, you have to have your visions and values aligned as well. And those shift when you hit mid-age, right? So we've gone that far to kind of take this all into a food, fitness, frame of mind, infrastructure in a 6-week program. And we also are hoping to have some retreats kicking off at the beginning of the year too. So yeah.
Talking about estrogen and HIIT training. And let's tell people what HIIT training is.
I'm sorry, say that one. HIIT training? Okay.
Estrogen and HIIT training.
Yeah. HIIT training is huge. High intensity interval training, which is not high impact, to be very clear. You can do high intensity interval training in a pool, on a bike, in a rower, on a treadmill, wherever you want. It's about getting your heart rate up to a certain level. And on average for, women who are in their early 50s, that's going to be, 160 beats per minute, roughly. And we can calculate that for you. But the point to that is when you do HIIT training, When you get your heart rate to that level, it creates something, a protein called GLUT4, which actually substitutes as estrogen. So it helps with that carb utilization of moving those carbs faster, more efficiently into your muscles and cells for use. So having HIIT training as a female is hugely important, as opposed to going out for a long, slow run, walk, bike ride, whatever. We may feel like, oh my God, I got to go out and spend like 2 hours so I can burn calories. No, you don't actually. You're better off to do a 30-minute high intensity workout and some strength training. Let's add that in there. But that's really what you need to be doing at this age.
What's the benefit of the strength training?
So that is, as you lose muscle, we lose muscle mass as we age, right? So we lose it faster and we build it slower, just double whammy, just so much fun. So, certainly there's the vanity piece of it. I don't want to get into that, but it's really about maintaining strength for a couple different reasons. The first is we lose metabolism when we lose muscle, right? Because muscle burns more calories than fat does. So when women start to feel that fat around the middle, that kind of thing, mostly that's because we're losing muscle mass and our body is making up for that by, having more fat. Yay. So that happens in menopause. The other thing is the obvious we've talked about our whole lives, which is strength training can actually help with your bone density. And as much as we've overheard this, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have, your stability, your mobility as you go through life. Right. So that goes back to visions and values of where do you want to be at 75 years old? Like I love, Joan, why am I blanking?
Joan McDonald.
Yes, thank you. Joan and Ernestine Shepherd. I mean, these women who are in their 70s and 80s are kicking ass, excuse me.
Yeah.
You can bleep that. But it's all about being able to climb a mountain if you want to, but get up out of a chair when you're 80 years old. And if you can't, the bigger issue is if you fall, which is very common, stability is a huge issue. If you fall, your recovery time is going to be a lot harder if you don't have any, strength to help you with that. And as you and I both know, unfortunately, that leads to death in a lot of cases and not recovery. I mean, depending on where you are in your, your health and all that. But, there's a big link between, well, actually, I wrote this, on our Facebook page the other day. You may have read this. McKinsey just had a study and I can't remember who did it, but the point was, balance is hugely linked with mortality. So if you don't have good balance, right, there's an 84% higher chance that, you'll have an earlier death. And I can't tell you what quote unquote good balance is qualified wise. I know, it's standing with one leg up and, maybe closing your eyes but I don't know all the metrics around it, but my point is only, balance is hugely important. And so that comes with, having strength, obviously, to have balance. Yep. So strength is important for a number of reasons.
Yeah. And they can go together, right? So if you asymmetrically load the body, you just nothing heavy, you have like a 15-pound kettlebell and you put it in one hand and you push it over your head and you hold it there, in order to keep yourself from falling over.
Right.
Your whole central nervous system is lit up by doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's simple stuff. I mean, that feels so
elementary,
but I mean, that's the type of thing. We do a lot of that at Be Untethered in the Transform 6 program. We have a great trainer who's put together a great program that is just helping women, first of all, know what to do, because strength training is a little bit intimidating for a lot of women. They haven't done it. They don't want to go into a gym where there's, 65 million men in groups standing around like, ooh, big and strong. And so it's a good starting point to get women sort of back in the game with strength.
That's right. I'm a huge proponent of HIIT training and of strength training. And
good to hear. You can join our women's group. Just kidding.
I don't think I'm ready for a gender change.
No, let's not do that.
A little late in life.
Nothing wrong, but just, I like you as you are.
Good. We got a few minutes left. Tell me, you got a book coming out.
Yeah. It's funny. You never think you're going to do this, but I did. And the book is coming out. It's around midlife crisis to some degree. And it's around, giving some pointers, really. It's the lessons that was learned from the 4 years of global minimalist travel, and helping women think through how to optimize their best rest of their lives. And that's from a mental standpoint. But then there is also in it the physical things that we've talked about today. So the food shifts that should take place and the physical shifts that should take place, the exercise shifts. So the book is kind of a part self-help and it's part, a mindfulness book. So yeah, so that's coming out in October.
What's it called?
Right now, this is a TBD, but it is called Midlife Turning Crisis into Quest.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
So I just want to like a shout out to all the women out there who are listening to this, that I hear so many stories of, accepting this sort of like, you must accept your grim reality.
Right?
No, you don't.
Right. That's yeah. That's the reason for
so
being
much you can do.
Untether from those societal stigmas. That was the old school, right? Things are different now. We don't have to listen to that anymore.
And you may have a wonderful physician. My experience with physicians is that they are very, very good at certain things, but they're not superhumans. They don't know everything. And I would be shocked if you went to your physician and said, what's this thing about estrogen and carbohydrate metabolism? If they're just, they have no idea, because that's not their thing.
Right.
But it's your thing. And so if you want to know about this, you go to somebody who really knows about it, and you're it. I'm just saying.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Well, we have a good team behind us too. I mean, let's not necessarily put me out there as yes, okay, I have expertise, but I also have a good team of dietitians and doctors and trainers behind it as well, because
who you picked.
Yeah. Yes, I did. Yes. Because it's important, to have people that believe it and understand it, obviously the science behind it. And I feel really lucky because these are some really highly credentialed women that, understand that this is the truth, and that, is not easy. It's not necessarily an easy thing to make a life shift, but it's baby steps, right? You don't have to be perfect day one. You just have to start maybe making some changes, and you'll start to feel better. And then you'll want to make more changes. It's that simple.
That's right. After a couple of days, you're going to feel different. You're going to feel better, and you're going to say, "Oh, maybe there's more to this."
Yeah,
and I can do
absolutely.
This. And that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast. You're always fun to talk to. So, and my favorite thing, Ageist is awesome. It really is. We're very aligned with what you guys are doing, and we'll stay buddies forever.
Absolutely. I'm not going to ride a bike with you though. You're going to kill me.
Not right now, but maybe I'll work on it. And then I will want to ride a bike with you or hike a mountain.
Oh yeah. All right. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks, David.
Bye now. Thanks everyone for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed the show, you have the opportunity to leave us up to a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this program. You can also leave us a comment. We love those. And if you want to get in touch with me, david@superage.com. I answer all of my email directly and personally. So hit me up. Any questions you got? And ladies out there, hey, why don't you share this program with some of the men in your life so that they can hip up to, what goes on with estrogen and such? I think this is a topic like all of us, all genders, all ages should be talking about and understanding, and why we're not, I have no idea. So thank you, Anissa, for illuminating us. And everyone, she has a great program called Be Untethered. We'll leave that in the show notes, as we will a link to our 2 sponsors, which are Viome and Element. Check them both out. And hey, have a wonderful week. Stay away from the moose. And we'll see you next week. Take care. Bye now.